Hey, good evening. It's Thursday, June 8th, and welcome to Everyday Talk 24/7. I'm going to continue looking at this idea of how wisdom applies to our lives. So I have a question for you tonight. Have any of you ever been involved in a conflict, in an argument? I think the answer probably is yes, you have. And I've got one factor here. Whether you're refereeing an argument, trying to end one, whether you've been involved in one yourself, we've been engaged in those kinds of things. And there's one thing that is usually the first question that we ask ourselves or other people: who's right? We're trying to determine who is right and who is wrong. Now, that's not wrong in and of itself, but as you can see by the title on the thumbnail tonight, we have to be more than right. It's important to be right, but that's only the first step. If we're going to be wise, if we're going to represent God well, if we're going to have the conflict be other than just a force of wills, we've got to be able to we have to be able to understand that we have to be more than right. That's huge. We'll be looking at James 3:17, and the centerpiece of the 7 points, the one in the center, is, in one version, open to reason. In other translations, you'll get things like being submissive or being willing to yield. But they all have the same idea. Are you really open to reason? Open to working this thing out and not just pushing your own way, not just trying to be right. So there are other considerations here which we need to add to the rightness. And if we take these three considerations into account and work with them, it may even change our idea of what we think is right. It may actually help heal. And here are three considerations. You could do more, but here are three when there's a conflict. The first thing to consider is not just the immediate, but what's the history? Most arguments, particularly in families, don't just start bang in an instant. They have a history to them. But we make a mistake when we focus only on the immediate. Again, whether you're a parent trying to deal with an issue between your children, whether it's a parent and a teenager, whether it's husband and wife, whatever the situation is, if we only deal with the immediate, that's when we get in trouble. There's also a history. We have to understand what led up to this thing. What are the factors that are happening? To get a full picture of what's going on. Do we want to really grasp here, if there's a conflict, the meaning of, say, we've looked at Matthew 7:12 recently, to do unto others, treat them the way you would want them to treat you. So we want to take a deep breath and say, there's more to this than just this immediate. I've got to look at the history, the context, and get a better understanding. It's kind of a rule of thumb that there's a conflict, that the person who gets in trouble is the one who retaliates, not the one who initiates. We want to avoid that. So again, to be more than just right, the first consideration is we've got to consider the immediate and the history, both of them. Secondly, the second thing I want to consider, my answer, my response has got to be one of gentleness. Because when there's conflict, there's usually anger, upset, wrath. And the scripture is very clear. If you read the first 4 verses of Proverbs 15, we get an extended discussion there that a gentle answer turns away wrath. So if you're involved in this conflict, being open to reason means that you speak with gentleness rather than upset. You can't do this to me. But answer in a way that with a tone is not weak, but a tone that says, hey, I really want to understand what's going on here. Help me Understand how I've offended you. And then just don't jump back with an immediate defensive response. Really listen. Again, Proverbs 18:13 as well. You want to listen. You want to listen not to give your own defense, but you want to listen in such a way that you hear the other person out. So that gentle answer, it's strong, but it's gentle. It shows you care, is the second consideration. Then the third consideration is that you're representing Christ and not yourself. You're representing Christ and not yourself. Because in every discussion, every disagreement, every conflict, everything where there's the heat of the moment, Jesus is also right there. And we looked at this, if you recall the videos we did on self-talk. Jesus is right there with us. He doesn't go anywhere. He knows our thoughts. So we want to represent Christ well. We want to take up the admonition in Colossians 3:15 and 16, where we want to let the word of Christ dwell richly within us, that word of peace. Have Jesus' word dwelling within us, so that that's what comes out, not just my own self-defense, not just my own reason. Well, I did this because you did this. But realize that God is there. He has something for each of you to learn in this conflict. It's not a matter of winning and being right, as it is, am I representing Christ well? That'll help us get to the bottom of things. This is not a stance of being weak or placating or letting the other person have its way. It's acknowledging that the Lord is king, the Lord is sovereign. He is there with you. Jesus is mightier than both of you, whoever in the conflict. You can trust him. If you've been wronged, honoring God is the best way to deal with that. And then this brings us to the last point that sums everything up. And it's how James ends this section on wisdom from above. He says, what? We need to be involved in peace. And that was an earlier element of having wisdom from above. Peacemakers sow in peace. If they sow in peace, they gave a harvest of peace. We have to be interested in and invested in peace if we want to see peace happen. Not just being right. See, if you are driven by what's right more than anything else, you're going to be angry, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be driven by a sense of justice. And it will leave things in wreckage. You will be participating in the relational forest fires that the first 13 verses of James 3 talk about. But these three factors of seeing both the immediate and the history and the context, of truly being invested in caring, truly being involved, being about doing what's going to bring honor to God. That's where the hope is. Am I going to be invested enough to have that gentle answer? That's the second one. And then the last one, remember, you're representing Christ and not yourself. This is what brings peace. If all you care about is being right, then you're going to keep the conflict going. But if you're invested in peace and representing Christ well, then investing in these things, realizing I've got to be more than right, is what's going to bring healing to our relationships and begin to end this conflict which so dogs us. So yes, we want to be right, but we want to be much, much more than right. Again, love your thoughts, comments, feedback. This is an important area because conflict dominates so much of our lives. So I look forward to hearing from you about this. Thanks so much for being here, and Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow. You have a great night. Bye-bye.